open it up for questions at the end of the session, so we'll have a little time for questions.
Hi everyone, thanks for welcoming me here today. My name is Dan, I'm the social media editor at the Denver Post. I've been there for just about 3 years, and what I really do is I work with journalists, reporters within the newsroom to help them use digital tools, and especially social media, to tell stories more effectively, to reach younger audiences, like many of you sitting in this room, and do lots of other things. And I'm really interested in the way that we can work as journalists in this social media age to be better filters of information. How many of you woke up this morning and accessed news on a mobile phone or some other computer? Anyone? How many of you picked up a newspaper? All right. I'm interested to see what the divide is as well. I think what we really need to focus on, as I said, as journalists in this kind of day and age, is just the amount of information that is being produced every single day, and how we can work better to be better filters of that information to remain relevant. In 2012, 5 times as much digital information will be created just in the world as was produced in 2008. That's a staggering amount. And I think a lot of people really sort of lament now about how much information there is out there. But in reality, we've had sort of an information overabundance problem for quite some time. I'm going all the way back to when Gutenberg printed his first Bible. What this did was it took writing and information and brought it out into the public sphere and pushed it forward in ways that wasn't previously possible. This is sort of what that graph looks like in terms of amount of information that is being created by all of these different things. A 5-fold increase in 4 years, and as you can imagine, as we go beyond this, it's going to continue to just grow and grow and grow. Other things, going back to social networking. To give you an idea of just how much information there is out there, especially on social media now, for us to filter through and to go through the peak of Twitter reaction. How many of you are Broncos fans in here? Some, okay. When Tim Tebow threw his 80-yard touchdown pass in January to Demaryius Thomas, Twitter exploded with 9,420 tweets per second of information. Just, is there any way that any human being can actually look at that and process that information? No, there's no way. Take a look at our post on the Denver Post Facebook page, which is, it has a staggering number of fans, about half of what our circulation is in print, 140,000 fans. There's a number of people we have on the social network. 9,000 people liked this post, and another 1,625 people wanted to weigh in and talk about what they felt when they saw that moment. So there's a tremendous amount of information. Facebook has 845 million active users. These are people who have signed into Facebook in the last 30 days and interacted with the service in some way. They actually have more users than that. And they upload 250 million photos per day. It's the largest photo sharing service in the world. And for those of you who are really following the news, they bought a mobile sharing, photo sharing service called Instagram a couple days ago, so they're expanding their domain even more. 48 hours of content is uploaded to YouTube every minute. That's 8 years of content in a single day. And journalists have always been filters in some kind of sense. And that's because of economics and space and time. You could only put so much information into a printed paper or into a radio broadcast or onto a DVD broadcast. There were certain time limits. You couldn't just talk for an hour if you wanted to. You couldn't just write 10,000 words on a newspaper. Like, you had to filter information. And they've always been filters, and they still very much are. But delivering information to a massive audience 25 years ago was expensive. And for people like me in the newspaper industry, it's still very much, part of our business at least, is still a very expensive kind of delivery process. It takes hundreds of people to put ink on paper, then to take those papers, put them in a truck, and drive them out to wherever they have to be. It's a tremendously, tremendously expensive process. Go to radio, go to television. It's tremendously expensive to have a TV antenna or a radio antenna and deliver information to your car radio or to a television set. It takes a lot of money to do that. TV stations pay a lot of money for satellite connections. Very expensive. But now reaching a massive audience costs almost nothing. If you didn't have a computer, you could go to the library, sit down, get on an internet connection, start up a free blog on Blogspot or WordPress, and theoretically be publishing to millions and millions of people. Like, not that you're going to do that right away, but the cost to reach a large audience has dropped to almost nothing. So there are now a lot more people who are involved in the process of potentially talking to one another, talking to the public. We don't need, if I want to reach a mass audience, I had to previously go through a newspaper, a television station, or for all practical purposes, a radio station, if I want to reach a massive audience very, very quickly. I don't have to do that anymore. So the barrier of entry into the marketplace has dropped, and so have the standards of quality in a lot of senses. There's just a lot more information. The natural kind of economics, again, of reaching large numbers of people meant that your quality had to reach a certain kind of level before you could really reach that people. Now you don't have to. I mean, think about your neighbor's blog or the number of things that you post on Facebook every day. If you are publishing something on Facebook in a status update about the party that you went to over the weekend, you are doing something that is just absolutely revolutionary and couldn't have even been thought of 10 years ago, prior to the internet. So finding good information is a lot harder because we have an overwhelming number of choices. The thing is, with all this revolution, is that there's still only 24 hours in the day, right? It's not like the day is extended. I have a lot more choices about where I get my information. And a lot of people can argue that the internet is really the medium that has destroyed journalistic authority because, again, you have more choices now than ever from which to get your information. You don't just have to come to the Denver Post if you want to get your Broncos news. You can go to the Denver Post, and you can go to ESPN, and you can go to your favorite blog on Pro Football Talk, and you can go to the NFL Network, and you can write your own blog and talk about the Broncos all you want just by yourself. And a lot of people kind of really see, and I think this is true, is that the internet has destroyed journalistic authority because we're no longer just the gatekeepers of information. If everybody has the ability to publish information very cheaply, then our authority is diminished. And it's kind of interesting as you watch this, if you look at Gallup polls like through the decades, trust in the American, I'm focusing specifically on the US press, trust in the American media has declined steadily for the last 30 or so years. I don't think it's this year, but in 2010 was like an all-time, absolute like all-time low. 44% of people said they did not believe that the American press was delivering information to them that was unbiased, fair, and accurate. 44%. So nearly almost half the people in the United States don't trust the press don't trust the information they're getting from us. But what I really see is that social media presents us opportunities to actually regain trust from our news consumers, to regain trust and authority in a lot of ways, and showing our audience that, once again, we're valuable. What are some of those reasons? Information consumption patterns have changed with social media. I really like this quote. Some of you may have heard this before, but if the news is important enough, it will find you. That was said, it was a student who was quoted in a 2008 article in the New York Times about ways that people were finding out about the Barack Obama campaign and how young people were getting information about the presidential race. And this guy, who I forget his name, like encapsulated, if the news is important enough, it will find me. How many of you got some major piece of news via text message just in the last couple of days? Anybody? Some people, it happens. Or you saw it on Facebook, or somebody shared it on a Twitter account, if you've seen like that. We are no longer in the position where we have to go out and seek news. The news comes to us if it's important enough. Someone's going to talk to you, someone's going to say something. So information consumption patterns have changed. If you look at Facebook, the Denver Post is just as present on Facebook, and I'm in your stream of information, and our journalists are in your stream of information potentially just as much as your friends are, just as much as your family is. It's all this like one column of just information all mixed together in one place. So we don't have to go out and seek information if we want to find it. I think because of that, we have to do things, like I said, going back to journalists, that our value as filters is even more important than ever. A lot of people, again, celebrate the internet as being this thing, but finally, like the journalistic filter is over, like you don't have to rely on the mass media in order to get your information, like you can go out and find it yourself. Good luck with that. But take people like Andy Carvin, who is NPR's, I forget what his title is, social media editor, like community strategy editor. He has built a name for himself in, really in the last year, since the Arab Spring, covering and all through Twitter, the Arab Spring uprising. Some of you are probably familiar with this. But I don't have time, and most of you sitting in here probably don't have time to weed through all of the information that's coming through Twitter, all of the first-hand reports that are coming from Twitter, all of these citizen journalists who have access to nothing more than a cell phone to filter through and see all of this information. He's doing that job for you. He's going through the process. He actually publicly goes out and will say, someone will tweet him something and say, you know, so-and-so is, and this is just from last night, you know, so-and-so is saying this, or in fact the ceasefire isn't being obeyed by the Syrian regime in Homs. He'll actually publicly retweet something and ask, like, where's your source? Is this independently confirmed? He's practicing the process of journalism in public for you to see. And he's built over this last year this incredible network of people whom he's relied upon to give him first-hand accounts. None of these people are professional journalists in the traditional sense. None of them. None of them. They have a cell phone. Every one of you sitting in, I'm assuming everyone in here has a cell phone. Every one of you sitting in here has the potential to be a journalist. But with all that comes, I think, people like Andy, and you look at us doing the same thing. We publish a lot of information every day, 200 pieces of content a day. There's no way you're gonna read and consume all that. Somebody has to filter that information. So we did this recently with the Lower North Fork fire. Our job as online journalists and social media people was, okay, there's tons of tweets and tons of information out there coming from firefighters, from first-hand sources, from news agencies. How do we possibly organize this information in as real a time as possible to give people not only valuable information about the fire, but also inform people who are just interested? Well, you can use tools like, in this case, Twitter, Storify. Some of you may have heard of this, where we actually, I spent probably the first 3 days just sitting on this thing, watching stuff and handpicking stuff to put in here. Like, this is valuable, this is important. You don't have time to go through all that stuff yourself. Our job as the Denver Post to filter out important information, even if it wasn't, this is also a key point, even if it wasn't from us, if it was from a competing news organization, if it was from somebody else who wasn't a journalist of ours, it didn't matter. Our strategy in this social media age is, I can't assume that I'm going to be the only journalist, or we're going to be the only organization that's going to have all the answers and all the information. It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. And as you know, we've admitted that, and we say, well, we can become a resource for our community if we curate and pull together information that they will find valuable. This was viewed more than 80,000 times in the 5-day span of this, and it was cited on national media outlets as being like a resource for people to come to, not just, you know, like something you could curiously, you know, glance in upon, but it was really a resource, and we treated it like a live blog. We'd put updates in, pull in photos, all this other stuff. So again, my job is not necessarily, yes, we have people out there who are actually on the ground, like gathering information about the fire, but I was stepped back, and my team was stepped back, pulling out information from all these other sources as well. So social media is a way to establish trust between the audience and journalists, as trust in brands have declined overall. And filtering journalism, as the example of live blog shows, likely also involved the audience, or the people formerly known as the audience, the people who were out there with their cell phones near the fire and taking pictures early on. Or some of you may have seen the video of the family who was fleeing the fire and the flames as they were going out. That was an example of the audience now suddenly becoming journalists. So it's a journalist, not a job now, not to just research and report information, but to curate it too. And as I said, we encourage linking to outside sources on a journalist's feed as well. People are overwhelmed of information filter failure, not my term. Clay Shirky from NYU, who's a professor there, has coined this term. We're dealing with filter failure. We cannot filter. Our filters are not keeping up with the amount of information that is out there. That's where we come in. People will always need filters for the information because they don't have time to sit in on a 3-hour city council meeting to determine what is and isn't important. That's our job. That's what we need to do. And when sources can go direct and anyone can publish information, the value of our work as verifiers and filters and curators becomes critically important. And I think that's really where social media is taking us. I think that's where journalists have got to train their focus, is on this idea that your value can really be established now, not only as somebody who's on the ground getting information, of course, as a journalist, but also as a filter of information from all the other stuff out there. You can really, like I said, position yourself, and we're certainly doing it as much as possible. But shifting the focus from just, I go out, I get my information, to also doing that and filtering everything else that's out there. So with that, I thank you all again for welcoming me in.